Imagine a moment of pure, unbridled freedom. A warm night. A summer of 94 stretching across the mountains of Virginia like a blanket of heat and hope. A sprawling music festival in the sleepy town of Dawson, nestled deep between ridges and winding forest trails that seemed to fold the town into their arms. The Mountain Music Festival, back then, it wasn't just an event. It was a pilgrimage, a gathering of thousands who came for one thing: to escape, even just for a night. To leave behind the routines, the responsibilities, the noise of their lives, and lose themselves in the rhythm, the unity, the pulse of the music. The sun is sinking behind the hills as the air thickens with the smell of wet grass, spilled beer, and anticipation. Headlights snake into the valley. Vendors flip open their coolers and string lights. The stage lights blink on, glow warm, then blaze bright. The crowd erupts. It is celebration. It is electricity. It is the kind of night that feels untouchable until it isn't. Now, imagine that music stopping cold. Not fading. Not glitching. Stopping. Abruptly. As if someone pulled the plug on the entire valley. Because somewhere in the shadows of that celebration, for women vanished. For young women who came for the music, the freedom, the thrill of the festival, and never made it home. No screams. No struggle that anyone could recall. No trail. No sightings. Just gone. In a place packed with thousands of witnesses, not one saw anything. Their names quickly transformed from attendees to headlines. They became known as the Festival Four, their faces plastered across newspapers and taped to gas station windows. Smiling portraits frozen in time, eyes bright, hair curled, cheeks lifted mid-laugh. Photos that would soon be the center of prayer vigils, search efforts, and candlelit marches through the streets of Dawson. Police swarmed the mountains. Dogs combed the woods. Helicopters circled overhead for days. Volunteers searched creek beds and abandoned cabins. Reporters flooded the town. Parents collapsed into each other's arms, praying for any sliver of news. But nothing came, and that silence, that impossibly heavy silence, became the only clue. The investigation narrowed quickly, too quickly, some argued. Under pressure from the public, the media, and the families of the missing, authorities turned their attention to a man who seemed to tick every box. Rafe Colton, a festival promoter with a criminal record. A man with access to backstage areas, staff lists, and private sections of the grounds. A man who, in the eyes of law enforcement, fit the profile. The evidence was thin, but the fear was thick. The community was desperate for answers, for closure, for someone to blame. Grief, mixed with fury and exhaustion, pushed the story forward like a wave that couldn't be held back. Within months, Rafe Colton was charged, prosecuted, and convicted. Case closed. The town breathed again. Reporters left. Search teams dispersed. Life in Dawson returned to some version of normal. But one detail clung like a thorn, refusing to be ignored. No bodies were ever found. Not one. Despite exhaustive searches. Despite mapping, dredging, digging, probing. Despite every technique available in the 1990s, the women remained missing. This unsettled some investigators, bothered a few locals, and haunted the families, but officially, legally, publicly, the story was over. The Festival 4 had vanished in 1994, and Dawson, Virginia, moved on as though the mountains had simply swallowed them whole. But time has a strange way of shifting truths, of loosening secrets, of revealing cracks in stories that once seemed perfectly sealed. And while most people forgot, one child could not, because one of the missing women left behind a daughter, a little girl who grew up not knowing her mother, only knowing the shadow she left behind. Her name is Sloane Grayson. 3 decades later, Sloane has become an investigative reporter, the kind who doesn't accept easy answers, the kind who digs until her fingers bleed, the kind who sees the stories most people can't. Cold cases are her life. She hunts them, dissects them, resurrects their truths from silence. Each solved case, each uncovered lie, each long-buried secret. It all leads her back to one thing. Her mother, Patty Reed, won the festival for. 30 years have passed, but the wound hasn't healed. How could it? Her mother wasn't buried. Her killers weren't clear. Her story wasn't finished. So Sloane returns to Dawson, not as a child, not as a victim, not as a grieving memory, but as a professional, a woman with questions that have waited decades for answers. A reporter with a spine of steel and the skills to break open every stone the town has tried to keep in place. She comes for closure. She comes for justice. She comes for the truth. But Dawson is not a town that welcomes questions. Not about that night. Not about those women. Not about the conviction that tied the story together so neatly. The locals stiffen when Sloane arrives. Faces harden. Voices drop. Doors stay closed a little longer than normal. It's not just reluctance. It's something heavier. Something shaped like fear. And fear is rarely baseless. Because when Sloane begins her digging, pulling old case files, interviewing former staff, questioning festival goers, retracing her mother's last known steps, she notices something eerily consistent. Almost everyone wants her gone. Not politely, not cautiously, but urgently. It's as if the town itself is pushing her out. But Sloane is relentless. She always has been. She follows leads long after dark, sorts through records until dawn, walks the festival field in the fog, imagining her mother's last moments, imagining the paths the killer might have taken under the cover of night. And as she inches closer to the truth, she begins to feel it. She's not alone. Someone is watching her. Someone who knows she's digging in the wrong places. Or maybe exactly the right ones. Someone with a stake in keeping the truth buried. Someone who saw everything that night in 1994. Someone who has spent 30 years making sure that no one else ever would. Footsteps behind her. A car that follows too closely. A shadow at the edge of the woods. A note left on her windshield. At first, she tries to dismiss it. Fatigue, paranoia, stress. But Sloane has investigated enough killers to recognize the pattern. This isn't a coincidence. This is pressure. This is surveillance. This is a warning. And with every interview she conducts, every page of evidence she uncovers, every contradiction she exposes, the pieces of the puzzle begin to shift. The conviction of Rafe Colton wasn't airtight. The timeline was shaky. Witnesses were unreliable. Some testimony was manipulated. Some evidence feels disturbingly convenient. And then there are the missing bodies, the one part of the story that never made sense. Sloane's investigation begins to unravel the narrative the town clung to so tightly. A narrative that protected someone. A narrative that misled an entire community. Because what happened that night at the festival was not the work of a stranger. It wasn't random. It wasn't opportunistic. It was personal, calculated, controlled, protected. Sloane feels it in her bones. Her mother didn't just disappear. She was silenced. And the person who silenced her is still here. Still watching. Still hiding. Still dangerous. There's a moment Sloane will never forget, when she stands on the old festival grounds 30 years later. The grass is tall now, the stage long gone, the field reclaimed by nature. But as she walks across the land, she can almost hear it. The faint echo of music, the laughter, the cheers. And beneath it all, something darker, something that has lingered for decades, something that refuses to stay buried. And Sloane realizes that what she's about to uncover is far more dangerous, far more twisted than anything she came looking for. She is no longer just chasing a story. She is walking directly into the path of a predator who has operated in the shadows for 30 years. A predator who has killed before. A predator who is willing to kill again. Someone who watched her mother disappear. And now watches her. And as Sloane gets closer to the truth, she discovers something even more chilling. This was never about the festival for. This was never about a random tragedy. This was never just a cold case. This is personal. A story written in blood. A secret guarded by fear. A lie preserved by silence. Sloane Grayson's search for her mother's truth is about to open a coffin of lies that someone has spent decades nailing shut. Someone who has been waiting, watching, and preparing for the day the daughter of one of the missing women would come back to Dawson. Because in that quiet, ordinary mountain town, someone saw everything, and someone is still determined, desperately, violently, to keep the truth buried in the ground. But secrets have weight, and some secrets refuse to stay hidden. What Sloane is about to find is far more dangerous than what she's looking for.